The first thing we need to talk about is absolute value. So, unfortunately, you have all thought about and memorized that absolute value is a positive number, because what you're used to is saying, well, if I have the absolute value of -3, then I'm going to change the negative of a 3 into a positive, and now it's a positive 3. And if you already have a positive number, like the absolute value of 5, then you just say it's still just a positive 5. What's unfortunate about that definition is it's really not the definition, it's just a consequence of the definition. See, here's the thing. Absolute value, the definition is if you have a number line, and in that number line at the center is 0. Remember, 0 is a neutral number. It's not positive, it's not negative. Absolute value is just saying how far away from 0 are you? So earlier we talked about the absolute value of -3. So if I find -3, it's on the left side of 0. Here's -3. And if I'm right here at -3 and I want to get back to 0, I am going to move 3 spots. Now, technically, those 3 spots are a positive distance, right? You've never talked about going negative miles. Your rulers do not have negative numbers on them. Distance is a positive number. So when we talk about absolute value as being the distance from 0, and this would be a good thing to write in your notes, that absolute value is the distance from 0, then no matter where you are on the number line, whether you're at -3 or maybe you're over here at +3, no matter what, that distance you travel, no matter what direction you're going, is going to always be a positive number. And that's why your answer is always positive. Now be careful with that always positive thing, because what if it was the absolute value of -3 and then there was a negative out in front? See, what's happening is you're going to look at this first and you're going to say, hey, that in and of itself, absolute value of -3 is a positive 3. So you're going to say a positive 3. But then there's this negative out here that is still out there. That was not a part of the absolute value. That was on its own outside the absolute value. So that negative's still there. So technically your answer is -3. So just because you have an absolute value involved does not mean your answer cannot be negative. It just means that what's inside of it is the distance, which is positive. And so you need to be very careful about that. You also need to think about what if, this is algebra, so this wasn't actually any algebra here, this was just talking about absolute value. So what about algebra? Well, what if I brought in the absolute value of x equals 6? Well, most people are going to go right away that x equals 6 because, yeah, if I take the absolute value of 6, I get 6. But you also have to remember that you could also take -6, the absolute value of -6, and get a positive 6. Because remember, we're on that number line, and a positive 6 is 6 away from 0, right? But so is -6. That's also 6 away from 0. And so you get 2 answers here. This actually x value has 2 answers. X is going to equal a positive 6 and a -6. And because I don't like writing a bunch, we try to be efficient. We write x equals plus or minus 6. And so whenever you see that symbol, that means that your answer is both positive, so you get the positive 6, and then the negative on the bottom means that you have a -6. So it's just a quicker way of writing positive 6 and -6. Okay, the other thing that we have to talk about is this, some vocabulary. All right, so if we have the word velocity, okay, so velocity is talking about how fast you're going. And so if you want to write this down, velocity is the speed that you're going, which is how fast, your rate. But it also includes direction. Okay, and so if you're going up, your velocity is considered to be positive. If you're going down, like an acorn falling out of a tree, your velocity is considered to be negative. So whenever you talk about velocity, or if a formula asks you for velocity, you need to worry about if you're going up or down. If they ask you, though, for your speed, just speed, okay, that doesn't matter which way you're going. That is going to be the absolute value of velocity. Or maybe you want to see it this way. Speed equals the absolute value of velocity. And I forgot to mention earlier, when you want to show absolute value, it's these vertical lines that do not have a little thing on the end. It's just straight vertical lines up and down. And then anything inside of it is what you're considering to be absolute value of.